Um, Good afternoon. My name is Emma Martin, and I'm an associate planner with Arlington County. Um, we are recording today's meeting, and the video will be posted on the public webpage. The applicant, CH 1900 Associates LLC, has submitted a site plan amendment to modify conditions and to revise building and site elements for the Crystal House 7 and 8 buildings located at 1900 South East Street. Looking at the agenda, we'll begin with a brief presentation from county staff on the site plan amendment and a zoning ordinance amendment related to building height. The applicant will present the details of their application, followed by an opportunity for public discussion. We ask that you save your questions and comments for after the presentations. The bulk of our time will be spent on these discussions, and if you're using Teams, request to be called on by raising your hand using the hand symbol in the toolbar at the top of your screen. If you do not see the toolbar, try clicking your mouse anywhere in Teams, and we will also periodically open the floor to those of you that have called in by phone. You're more than welcome to ask more than one question, but we do ask that you please be mindful of other attendees so that everyone has an opportunity to speak today that wishes to. A couple of technical notes before we get started. Please remain on mute if you're not speaking. If you're using Teams, you may mute or unmute yourself by clicking the microphone symbol in the toolbar at the top of your screen. If you've called in by phone, you can mute or unmute using *6. If you're using Teams, you're welcome to turn on your camera while you speak to ask your question, but then we ask that you please turn it off again once you finish speaking. The meeting chat is open for questions of technical assistance only. For example, if you're having trouble hearing or you can't unmute yourself, please do not use the chat to ask questions about the project because this won't be visible on the recording or by anyone that's called in on the phone. So again, I'm Emma Martin with Arlington County's Planning Division. Today I'm joined by Aaron Schreiber and Matt Matuzik from the Planning Division, as well as Krista Matsis from Housing, Jane Kim from DES, and Andrew Pubolka from our communications team. Thank you all for coming today to this informational meeting for the Crystal House 7 and 8 site plan amendment located at 1900 South East Street. To get started, I wanted to give you an update on the project and let you know that through further analysis, staff has determined that this site plan amendment does meet the major site plan amendment criteria. Since this informational meeting had already been scheduled, we wanted to proceed with this meeting as the information presented here will not change based on the designation of major versus minor, but this application will need to go to the Planning Commission before the county board this fall. The criteria that triggered the major amendment was the expansion of gross floor area of the first floor by more than 20%. Through this proposal, the applicant is proposing to double the unit count, and the applicant has expanded the size of the ground floor to maximize the buildable area on top of the garage to accommodate proposed back-to-back multifamily units facing east and west, and to have 3/6 of 14 multifamily units rather than 3/6 of 7 units that were approved in 2019. With that being said, an SPRC meeting will be scheduled prior to a Planning Commission hearing, and we'll let you know the dates and times of those meetings as they are scheduled. Following the staff presentation for the Crystal House 7 and 8 site plan amendment, Matt Matuzik will introduce a zoning ordinance amendment that is related to this site that will impact building heights in certain areas of the CO Crystal City zoning district. Staff presentations, as I mentioned, will be followed by an applicant presentation, and then we'll close with community questions and feedback. So I'll start us off with an overview of the amendment. This site is located at 1900 South East Street in the Crystal Houses development, which was approved with Site Plan 451 in 2019. The site plan amendment is specific to Crystal House 7 and 8. The site zones CO Crystal City with the medium residential GLUP designation. The 2019 buildings were consistent with the approved locations provided for in the Crystal City Sector Plan's illustrative plan, and the applicant's providing more public park space than is recommended by the sector plan. In addition, the 2019 approval is compliant with the sector plan's recommendations for building height, form, and design, provide and deliberate taper in height and scale westward towards the existing single-family neighborhoods in Aurora Highlands. The approved new buildings were designed to address scale and walkability and are an improvement over the existing conditions at the site. 2019 approval included 819 new residential units and 4 new multifamily residential buildings and 3/6 of multifamily units, in addition to the retention of 2 existing buildings with 828 units. In addition to the standard site plan mitigations, the applicant implemented sector plan recommendations by providing two new public parks on site, a public tree-lined pedestrian pathway through the block, and a protected bike lane on the South East Street frontage of the block. The parking ratio is currently 0.65 spaces per unit, and the site's located in a transit-rich location near the Crystal City Metro Station. The original approval included 97.17 units per acre, with 427 units of additional density above the base, which is 72 units per acre, which was achieved via affordable housing, the on-street protected bike lanes, on-site public spaces, and other streetscape and utility improvements, as well as LEED Gold and Earthcraft certification for the new buildings. As amended in October 2023 and April 2024, the site plan is now approved for 98.17 units per acre, which was achieved by the commitment of affordable housing in Crystal Houses 3 and 6. With this site plan amendment, the applicant's proposing to increase the number of units from 21 to 42, which involves adding back-to-back units with half facing an internal courtyard on the east and half facing west towards South Fern Street. The applicant proposes to increase the residential gross floor area of the Crystal House 7 and 8 buildings from 45,367 square feet to 88,018 square feet, which is an increase of 42,651 square feet, excluding 1,273 square feet of density exclusions for space in the underground garage that the applicant's proposing to use for tenant storage. The applicant is also proposing to change the building height by 1 story or 11.99 feet to incorporate a third story to each unit that will have a loft and a roof terrace. The units will also have a basement garage with 2 parking spaces per unit. The applicant's proposing to reduce the number of parking spaces by 10 and increase the ratio of compact parking spaces to 50% compact for the buildings. Crystal 7 and 8 to be specific. The proposed parking ratio for the entire site would be 0.60 spaces per unit, and the applicant states that the compact ratio for the entire site would be under 15% as is required per the site plan conditions. The applicant's proposing 24 bike parking spaces, which is an increase of 2 spaces from what was approved in 2019, and the applicant is proposing to reduce the number of transformers from 5 to a 3-phase transformer for each building for a total of 3 transformers for the Crystal Houses 7 and 8 buildings, to relocate them closer to the building's electric meter and to allow for increased screening from the public view. The applicant is requesting changes to the site and building as well as revisions to the condition language. This slide summarizes the changes requested for the site, building, and condition. In addition to the topics I already covered in the last slide, changes to the building and site include, if you could just mute your microphones while you're not speaking, that would be great. Thank you. In addition to the topics covered in the last slide, changes to building and site include a revised parking garage layout, changes to the courtyard layout to accommodate a change in building footprint, a modification of the various utility locations, as well as changes to the floor plans and facade materiality and colors. As approved, Site Plan 451 allows for 1,664 units for 16.5 acres, 0.95 acres for 98.2 units per acre. This site plan amendment proposes to add 21 units, so the new density, if approved, would be 99.41 units per acre, which will be justified by committing more affordable units in other Crystal Houses buildings. The applicant proposes changes to the conditions to modify the parking ratio, clarify requirements for construction timing for various elements, including the masonry wall between the Crystal House 6 and 7 buildings, the mid-block pedestrian pathway, elements of the civil engineering plan, and the option for Crystal Houses buildings to either use Earthcraft or LEED certification. This slide shows the approved South Fern Street west facade on the left with the proposed facade on the right. Here we've got the approved elevations for Crystal House 7 on the left with proposed on the right. You'll notice there's one additional story on the right. The height, as I mentioned, is changing by 11.99 feet. Building elevation 1, shown on the top of the slide, is the South Fern Street or west side of the site, and the elevation 3, shown on the bottom, is the internal or east side of the site. These are the approved and proposed elevations for Crystal House 8. Again, the height's changing by 11.99 feet, and elevation 1 is South Fern Street, and elevation 3 is the east or internal side of the site. This is the approved color palette on the left with proposed on the right. Revisions to the facade include changing the color of the brick, metal panel, architectural stone, aluminum window, and metal accent colors, as well as proposing changes from the approved materials, including corrugated metal and perforated metal, to the proposed cementitious siding and dark metal railing. Through this proposal, the applicant has increased the unit count and the size of the ground floor has expanded to maximize the buildable area on top of the garage. Whereas before there were 3 rows of 7 units on top of the garage with a rear deck, they have now doubled the unit count by splitting each in half with units facing east and west, with each row of 7 turned into a row of 14, which led to an increase of the ground floor GFA by about 41.67% as a result. The applicant's proposing to redesign the garage layout to reduce the number of parking spaces and to reconfigure access to the garage. The blue stars on this slide show the garage entrances. The garage access was previously located in the rear corner of the Crystal House 7 building on the left on the slide and is now on the end of both the Crystal House 7 and 8 buildings with stairs leading up from each individual unit from the garage. Relocating access to the garage will allow each townhouse to maintain independent parking on each lot, as a new proposed central drive aisle within the building will separate the reconfigured front and rear lots. The applicant's not proposing any ADA parking spaces since the buildings do not have elevators and are therefore not accessible. The applicant approved the proposed parking ratio for Crystal 7 and 8 was 94 spaces for 21 units, and the applicant is now proposing 84 spaces for 42 units, resulting in 2 spaces per individual unit for the Crystal House 7 and 8 buildings, each with 1 standard space and 1 compact space. The approved parking ratio for the site is 0.65 spaces per unit, and the proposed parking ratio for the site with this amendment would be 0.6 spaces per unit. Now, Matt Matuzik will present the zoning ordinance amendment, and afterwards, I'll ask the applicant to introduce themselves before their presentation. And then we'll take questions after. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma, and good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to spend a couple of slides briefly highlight something we discovered during the course of the review with this specific site plan amendment that I think is actually going to help us improve the way in which this site and others in this portion of Crystal City might be reviewed in the future. So it's actually kind of a helpful discovery, but we do have to consider as a minor zoning ordinance amendment, given what's being updated here. So what I wanted to do is, in the next slide, give you a sense of what's happening, particularly since what we are looking at now compared to 2019 is, rather than having a consolidated building along Fern Street, we now have several smaller sticks of towns that are being proposed. And what that does is, if you look at just the massive block that this site represents all the way from 18th to 22nd, is that we typically, under single ownership and a single site plan like we had in 2019, establish one singular average site elevation for that entire property. And all those new buildings that are proposed surrounding the existing buildings are measured from that determination. The issue here is that when you look at, and if you ever walked Fern Street near 18th, both of those private properties are significantly depressed, much lower than the surrounding streets. And what that does is that when you have smaller individual buildings like townhomes, they will be measured from that much lower average site elevation that all of Crystal Houses has been developed from. And what that does is actually start to work against the envisioned form of development that we've had in the Crystal City Sector Plan, which always anticipated a 3-story form of development along that very western edge of the district. So if you look at that color map in the middle of the slide, you're very familiar with kind of how we depressed building heights moving towards the west and near the district boundary, across from which you have the single family neighborhood. Here we want to make sure that that anticipated form of development can still be achieved regardless of topography changes or a very significant site area that may reduce and lower the average site elevation. So those are some of the existing conditions that were a factor in the analysis that took place with this current site plan amendment. And if you look at the next slide, specifically that northernmost townhouse development really kind of exemplifies what's happening here, where the perceived height of the project, if you're walking along Fern Street, still mirrors what the sector plan envisioned, approximately 35, 36 feet. However, from our perspective, the way we have to measure it is really from the back of that building, using the average site elevation for the entire block. And in that calculation, that same building measures 46 feet, which is much taller than what the heights map depicts in the Crystal City Sector Plan, and the associated CO Crystal City zoning district. So what we're trying to do is find a way where this site and others like it, whether it's Crystal Towers to the north or other sites to the south, can still achieve the same vision that we've had in the Crystal City sector plan, but not be constrained as much simply because they have a larger site area or they have to deal with some topography changes. So the way we're going to propose doing that in my final slide is really maintain the same 35-foot height restriction, but also suggest that a three-story form of development is just as acceptable. So moving forward, the recommendation from staff will be on that very western edge of the district, so kind of the lightest yellow designation that you see on the map. You can do 35 feet, as you previously could, but also 3 stories, whichever is higher. And this way, if topography is an issue and you're dealing with a significant site area that might artificially depress the average site elevation, that height restriction that's in the map legend does not count against you, and you still are able to deliver the envisioned height that the sector plan always anticipated on this transitional area on the western edge of the district. So that's kind of the straightforward, very minor zoning ordinance amendment that we're going to be processing and bringing forward to the county board at the same time as this site plan amendment. I'll stop there and I think turn back to Emma.
Thanks, Matt. So now the applicant will present, and I ask that whoever is speaking just quickly introduce yourself before you start. Thanks.
Sure. Welcome, Nick Cummings here with Walsh Colucci. I'm the land use attorney for the applicant for this phase of the Crystal Houses development, which is, of course, is EYA. We're excited to present to you today. I have Jack Lester and Jack McLaurin here with me from EYA, and of course, other members of our team for questions. Very briefly, because we want to be economical here with time in this limited time meeting. Brief background, the original approval for the development was in 2019. We had a series of SPRC meetings and open houses on park design leading up to commission meetings in the county board. It was actually approved in December of 2019, the same day as Amazon's Met Park buildings. And the year since, my former client sold the property to the Washington Housing Conservancy, which then donated infill development rights on site to Arlington County. Arlington sought out a partner to build that development with a huge focus on affordable housing. Those partners are, of course, APA and EYA. And we've previously made changes to 2 other buildings, CH6 with approval in October of last year and CH3 with approval in April. Both of those are affordable housing, while these new buildings are market rate townhouse style multifamily. And so with that, I'm going to go on to Jack Lester and Jack McLaurin, who are going to give you much more detail on our proposed buildings.
Thank you all. Thanks, Nick. My name is Jack Lester. I'm a partner with EYA. I'm joined this afternoon by my colleague, Jack McLaurin, who leads our architecture and land planning, Angelina Fuller, who works with me on the development side, as well as Will Carnahan. Thank you very much. We are super excited to be a part of this really amazing team with APA as our development partner, but really the county is a critical partner here, as is WHC and Amazon. We have a pretty robust presentation. We're going to go through it quickly so that there's time for questions. But just at a high level, a little bit about EYA. We are in our 33rd year as a company here. We are locally based. We focus just within our region. We're a 110-person company, and we take on 2 to 3 projects per year and really get the focus of our vertically integrated team here to not only be here at the front end, meeting with staff and elected officials and community members, but we will be our general contractor, be responsible for our sales and warranty. So we're committed to the communities in which we build. As I said, we've got a pretty robust presentation today, but before we get into the slides, we took what was a really good plan that was approved, I think Nick said, in 2019, and we kind of created a shared vision, working with the team, working with the community, and we think we've come up with a plan that just really hits on a lot of important issues. One, this plan provides more housing at a more attainable price. We've highly designed the public spaces. I think you'll see in some of the images, exceptional architecture and materials. We are incorporating sustainable building practices, including making this all electric. We incorporated the best practices in stormwater management. We've doubled the dedicated parking spaces for the residents. We've added more bike parking. We've created more land value for the county to help support the affordable housing that's going on this larger site. We've improved the pedestrian connectivity, and we've provided more tree canopy, all within the context of this plan. So let's go to the next slide. That's a little bit about us. Here is a map of where we have built. It's been a while since we've been in Arlington, but some of our key projects there that we're still very fond of are Monument Place and in Clarendon. But we are super excited to be back in the county. Next slide. This is just some imagery of recent projects, except for Clarendon, which is over 20 years old now, but two at a Robinson Landing project in Old Town Alexandria. Reservoir District is going on at the McMillan Reservoir. We're building a similar product there to the back-to-back. And Cabin John is where we took a surface parking lot serving a retail center and built 48 beautiful townhomes there. We have had a pretty robust community engagement. We've met with these groups, and I would just, I think staff could characterize it, but there's been support for the project. I think enthusiasm for it. I think people appreciated the plans that we've shown, the highly designed public spaces. I think some of the comments were really focused around the architecture, design, and mostly, more specifically, the color palette. We think we've addressed that, but we want to hear more back from staff and from the community. And I know we've heard about drop-off parking. We've created some dedicated spaces for Ubers and UPS. We know that's a constant challenge. Let's walk into the next slide. So just a high level overview, 42 back-to-back for sale townhomes in 3 buildings. They are going to be, as Jack McLaurin, my partner, will explain, fee simple and townhome like. There is underground parking. We talked about the public open spaces, 3 prominent ones that we've created. And at a high level, you see how we fit in CH7 and 8 into the larger development schedule. We expect or hope to close by the end of next year or Q1 of 26, and then be completely done with construction and everyone moved into their new home within 2 years of that. So a couple of project details, again, at a high level, 42 homes. They are 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 24 visitor spaces for bike spaces, and then 84 total spaces for residents and their visitors. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack McLaurin, who leads architecture and land planning for EYA.
Okay, I'll try to be brief here, but I just want to kind of give you an overview of some of the spaces that weren't necessarily talked about. As Jack mentioned, we have 3 what we consider prominent open spaces or small parks. The one here between CH 8A and 8B, we kind of call a hyphen park, but it is a pedestrian connection from Fern Street to the interior of the site. I'll show you a rendering of this in a minute. And then what we're kind of calling our gateway park here, which is also a pedestrian connection from 18th, but continues across the street. This is a pedestrian connection into and through the site that was a part of the master plan, and the county and the previous approval felt very, very strongly about. So we certainly honored that connection. And then we have what we're calling a pocket park over here in front of CH7. And one of the ideas of, or the benefits of using this different building typology, which we're calling a back-to-back, is that the buildings are fronts on both sides. We certainly have front doors on Fern Street, but now we have front doors towards the interior of the site, and versus kind of the back of building or what used to be a garage face under the previous approval. So now we have front doors on these green spaces. There's a public safety benefit to that. There's activating the green spaces, and then just pedestrian connectivity all the way through the site. And as Emma mentioned, these are our garage entrances, which do ramp down to the below grade garage. It'll be above grade on this site. This is kind of the most extreme building height component that Matt did a good job of representing that section where we're sort of 45 feet, but really the other sides are going to be fully buried and just be 3 stories from this particular side. This is the building plan comparing the prior approval to our current approval, and the red line you see is the prior building footprints. So we are largely the same size building envelope or footprint. These are those parks that I mentioned, and you can see now they're keyed in there with some descriptors, and I'll go into the circulation here. This is the red dash line are the neighborhood sidewalks. You can see there's nice connectivity in and through the site, and then the green are more kind of just serving the homes themselves. Our spaces, our pocket parks and spaces are not gated. None of our projects that we tend to do are gated because there are these infill communities that want to absorb the fabric of the surrounding neighborhood and allow both visually and physically the connections and allow people to come in and out and enjoy the spaces. This is that gateway park that I mentioned before that is continuing across the street, but then allows people to come in. There will be both more straight and direct pedestrian connections here through a stair system, but also ADA friendly paths that will get people with disabilities in and into the site. And you can see this is very lush landscaped. This is certainly not a picture of what it would look like on day one, but what it would look like after several years of maturity. So we think we've done a good job there. And I will say that I believe the prior approval was a little bit light on designing these outdoor spaces. And we really tried to, not only because of this process, but we try to set the vision early and show the community and people with the county what it's going to look like. We put a little bit extra work into these spaces, into the design now, so the vision is a little more clear. This is kind of a street level view of that same connection. If you were standing in the site and we're heading towards Fern Street up the non-accessible path, the ADA route would be over to the side over here. This is that pocket park over there next to 18th Street, which is on the other side of this wall. And we did have some back and forth with staff where the prior approval required a masonry wall that extended all the way up to the top of the guardrail height. And we were happy to get agreement with staff to let us turn this into more of an ornamental railing. The reason for the full wall before was because, like I said, this used to be a garage face over here and then the entrance down into the CH6 garage. So they felt like it was a visual screen, whereas now we really don't need that. We want it from a safety standpoint, but we want it to be a little more permeable and let people kind of see into these spaces. And like I said, we now have front doors on these parks, and you'll see a nice stone veneer being proposed on this wall. And this is really kind of existing grade today. I'm sure you all are very familiar with the site where this corner up here by Fern and 18th sits in a bowl and really ramps down. So this is very consistent with that. This is the high side of that same park. This is standing on 18th Street looking down, and you can see the nice ornamental railing here. We will do a more opaque stone wall closer to CH6 because the concern there is the view into their buried garage on that side. But the openness over here, I think, is appreciated. This is that hyphen park as seen from Fern Street, a kind of an aerial view. So you can see there's an ADA ramp system that will get you up there. This is the top of our garage, and some of the grades weren't really thoroughly thought out in the prior approval, whereas we really try to pay attention to it and figure it out ahead of time. There's another opportunity for this more ornamental art-like railing here because it has such prominence here on Fern Street. This is our architecture. This is, from a detailing standpoint, is very consistent with the prior approval. And frankly, we liked it and appreciated it. And I know the community and staff put a lot of work into that. So we didn't want to deviate and radically change the architecture. It's been modified a little bit for our new footprints and our new floor plans. We did hear through the community that maybe the materials were a little dark. There were some charcoal color bricks and some dark reds. And we took that to heart and we tried to lighten them up and turn it more into a taupe and rose palette with some accents of the white brick, which was consistent. So we feel like that was a pretty good suggestion from the community that we went with. This is that loft level that and Matt mentioned here. I'll show you in a minute, but this loft level is very integral to our program and why we needed this additional height. I will say that the prior approval had a very large penthouse structure up on the roof to be able to access the roof. That penthouse was excluded from height calculations and also excluded from gross floor area calculations. So now that we are a loft, we are including that. So that's one of the reasons for the height increase and the floor area increase. But it is set back with a roof terrace facing both Fern Street and also the interior of the site. This is a floor plan to kind of show you how the back-to-back works. And these dashed lines here are the property lines for each individual townhome owner. And if you were to connect these puzzle pieces and mirror this unit along this wall, and then also mirror it on this side, that's how you get your back-to-back. So on the interior units, there's one glazing wall, but the way this floor plan works, it's a townhome style design, but it's very open to the windows and where you want it to be. The sort of back of house kitchen and stair systems and mechanic rooms and bathrooms are windowless, which is certainly appropriate. This is that the garage level here, and you can see there's a common drive aisle here underneath. The garage is a continuous garage. It does have a secured access into the main garage structure, but then each homeowner will have their own individual parking spaces. Jack mentioned we have 2 spaces per home, which is a doubling of the prior approval. Even though there were 94 spaces in the garage on the prior, those weren't all resident spaces. Those were a lot of visitor spaces for some of the other multifamily buildings. And the idea here is that the homeowners come in the garage and then they pull directly into their spaces and they go into this door here and they are now inside their own individual unit. This is all individual access through their own secured door and stair system. Then we have a living dining kitchen on this level with a powder room. Then we have a master bedroom with a large luxurious walk-in closet, a laundry room over here on this side, and the master suite, the bathroom and the mechanical rooms. And then we have 2 bedrooms upstairs with a full bath, access to a roof terrace. And then this is just the roof plan here, but this is the roof terrace here. And as Jack mentioned, we are excited to bring all electric living into townhome style living into Arlington County. It's something that we know is coming down the road, and EYA likes to be ahead of the game. And we think our homeowners are going to greatly appreciate not only the comfort of all electric, but the sustainability aspects to it, but also it's more efficient, which means it's more economical too. This is an illustration. I won't go too far on the building height, but I think Matt did an excellent job talking about this. But this is a section all the way across Fern Street so that there can be an appreciation of what it looks like with homes on the other side of Fern Street. Now, if you live in this particular home here, please don't be upset if we got a couple of the dimensions off a little bit. We didn't go out and survey. This was kind of done by eye, but I think it's close to understanding the relative heights. And as I mentioned, our townhomes have a roof terrace component, so that 3rd floor is set back by about 10 or 12 feet. This is an image of our Cabin John project in Potomac, Maryland, and this is not our architecture. This is an exercise in just trying to show you how the setback loft is perceived from the public street. I'm all the way across the street taking this photo, and you can see you really don't get the idea of that 3rd story. It really feels like a 2-story type facade, which is one of the benefits of this particular home design. And I appreciate Matt's efforts through the zoning amendment to speak about height, not only in feet, because feet is, sometimes not understandable. It's really the number of stories, I think, is a little bit more perceivable. And people understand scale a little bit more.
They're asking us to wrap up.
That's it. And
Okay.
this is just to talk about the sidewalk and the vehicular circulation, and then kind of where we are in the public hearing process. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So at this time, community members that wish to speak and have joined by Teams, you can raise your hand using the toolbar at the top of the screen. Those of you that have joined by phone will be given an opportunity to speak as well, though I'm not seeing any who have joined by phone at this point. But if you're able to use the chat and would like to sign up if you are via phone, please do so. And we'll go in order of the hands that are raised. So we'll go ahead and start with Pam Van Hine.
Hi, thank you so much. I'll try to be very fast. First, thank you, Emma and Matt, for having this meeting. And we're all thrilled that there's going to be an SVRC and Planning Commission. And I want to thank EYA for changing the color palette. I'm very happy about it now. And specifically thank Angelina for her very precise response to my questions. Given that we're going to have an SVRC, I'm going to limit my questions to something related to the garage and the individual spaces. My first question is, are the garage, the travel lane, continuous between all three buildings, or just the Crystal House 8 is still separate from the Crystal House 7?
That's correct.
But
Seven has its own. I'm sorry, Emma, did you want to?
No, that's fine. Okay.
Okay.
Then if that is true, you talk about having a secure bike room. Are you going to provide 2 bike rooms, one for each garage?
At this point, we have the one very large bike room below what I call that hyphen park between 8A and 8B. And we would allow residents in Crystal House 7, to have access to that bike facility.
Okay. And will there be a way for them to get there underground, or they have to go above ground and then through the garage on the other side?
They'll have to go through the garage. That's right.
Okay. Okay. And I'm glad to hear that the garage main entrance is secure. That's important. Am I correct that for the individual units that people just drive in, there is no separate garage door? So the security is only on the door from the garage into their building. It'd be really nice if, when you sell these units, to include a security system on the door as an option. Our big question is garbage. And we don't need an answer now, but Nick and I were kind of discussing this, and we're trying to imagine. The first question with garbage is, do you know if you're going to be using the county garbage collection or a private collector? And what would be the implications of doing one or the other? I don't know what your townhouse would be allowed to do.
I think.
The question, yeah, go ahead.
I think my sense is that we would not be entitled to county trash pickup. I'm not 100% sure on that. If these folks are entitled, then that's great. What we have thought about, though, is the HOA will have a porter system where they will take out the trash cans on pickup day and then bring them back in so that there aren't cans sitting out, on the street. So what we've designated outside of the garage for pickup, the HOA will make sure they go out when they need to go out, and they go back in promptly after the trash is picked up.
Yeah, if we have our own private trash and porter system, I feel like we have better control over that.
Yeah.
And cleanliness, and it's something that's very important to us and our homeowners, and also the neighbors.
Okay. But if indeed, as the county does, you have 3 separate garbage cans, we were trying to imagine 3 separate garbage cans times 42 units, and where would you put all of those outside? So something to think about, how that's actually going to work, because having a gazillion garbage cans out there that the garbage collector would have to process, and everybody would have to manage, would just be a zoo. There's no room. It would take forever. So that was my main question. And I thank you so much. I think you're doing great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. It looks like the next hand we have is Ashley.
Everybody, Ashley Labadie with the National Landing Bid. Thanks for today's opportunity to engage with you all. We're really excited about this project moving forward. I have two questions. One is, did I hear correctly that there would be an affordable component to these 42 units? And if so, what is the breakdown of affordability and unit number?
So it's not on these 42 units. These will be market rate for sale product. Part of what's going on here is that the market rate components of the project that EYA is responsible for help add a lot of value to the rest of the project that makes realizing the affordable housing in CH6, CH3, et cetera, feasible, just given the cost of construction and the depth of the subsidies being provided in those buildings. I don't know if either Jack's wanted to say anything else.
Nope, that's it, Nick.
I can just
Okay.
jump in to say that to earn the bonus density for the additional 21 units, we will be talking to the applicant about which additional units in a different Crystal House building that they'll be earning that bonus density through.
Yeah, so what we'll do is to earn the 21 new units in CH7 and 8, we need to pledge that a certain number of units in CH3, for example, will be affordable. That's a kind of a legal requirement. The units in CH3 are already pledged to be affordable for like 100 years. We would be layering on a 30-year pledge on top of that. That's really just about formally earning that density with the already existing commitment. So it's not any new affordable housing that has been currently proposed, but it's recognizing that some of that huge amount of new affordable housing can earn these 21 units that we're adding on CH7 and 8. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. The other question is just about the open space between, I think it was 8A and B. It's sort of that shorter or shallower open space. Is that ringing a bell?
I think we call it the hyphen park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I noticed that there's a ramp and a stair, and I'm wondering if that's a design requirement because it's trying to clear the underground garage, or if there's a way for that to be designed with just an ADA pathway and just eliminate the two separate pieces of infrastructure.
Yeah, it is directly related to the grade and the topography. And yes, you're right. We're trying to get up above the garage, and then on the other side, we'll be coming back down. And in our mind, there's a duplicate connection, ADA and stairs, because some people prefer the more direct route, and some people don't want to take route associated with an ADA ramp. In that particular case, it's a switchback, so it's fairly efficient. Our other Gateway Park, it's a little more circuitous, just because, you know, we just wanted a little more graceful type of experience. But in our experience, both are really kind of desired.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Nick, I see that you have a hand raised.
Hey, Emma. Thanks. Thanks for this presentation. I think this is a really fantastic project. I'm really glad to see it moving forward. Two questions, actually. The first one is on visitor parking. You talked about there isn't any dedicated visitor parking. So is the intention that those second spaces would be the visitor spaces?
Well, yes. And so we're really clear, Nick, in our HOA documents that, residents, they don't have any rights beyond those two dedicated spaces. So folks that come with one car, well, then they will have an extra space for their visitors. Otherwise, that is it. There are no other visitor spaces beyond the 2 per unit.
We do have a few on the street interior to the site.
There are a few, and we've talked about those as being, for lay-by, quick, Uber pickups or pizza drop-offs, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
2 per unit, just to put it in context, 2 per unit is a lot for
Yeah.
Arlington, even for this type of housing. And
Absolutely.
if you're having like a Christmas party or some sort of big event, there's actually a good amount of commercially available public parking in Crystal City.
Mhm.
And so for a bigger, event where you have more guests coming to your home, there's definitely solutions in the area. And I don't think that anybody reasonably has, 10 plus parking spaces for all their friends at their home anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And my
I do
sec-
just, sorry, I do just
Go-
want to remind people that a lot of the streets in that area are subject to the residential parking permit program. So, those hours will have to be, obeyed by any visitors.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the
no, we're
concern
not
is,
planning for folks to use the street in the neighborhoods. I think that the encouragement is to use what you have, and then there's also garages nearby.
I mean, I will just say this, having done infill development now for over 30 years, this is a key issue. We are very upfront with our buyers. We don't just hand them the 200-page condo docs. We take it and say, these are the 10 things you really need to take away, including how visitor parking works.
right. Yeah, and I think as far as the resident parking, that's something we'll need to visit in the future because right now it's 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's a vestige of when we were trying to keep all the 20,000 Navy employees out of the neighborhood. And at some point, we'll need to revisit that with the county. My second question has to do with the housing affordability question. There's a bonus density requirement that you're required to achieve in order to get this bonus density. And I think, and this is more for the county staff, I'm wondering is, since we're dealing with the affordable housing crisis is today, and while it's admirable that you are going to commit additional units from the years 2128 to 2158, I don't think that quite solves the housing crisis that we have right now. So I'm wondering how staff is going to deal with that to make it more immediate. While it's great that we look out for our grandkids in 2128, I think we need to solve the problem today. So I put that out there for Emma and Matt.
That's certainly a great question. And I think I'll open it up for Matt if he wants to jump in. We've also got housing on the line as well. I think that's
So Emma and
I have a lot
can
of
help.
ideas on how to solve the housing crisis, but they won't be the same as county staffs. And I encourage you to reach out to me directly if you want to chat about that anytime.
my supervisor is also on the line, so I'll give it
So
over to
Nick,
Aaron.
I can help answer that. So specific to the request, as Emma mentioned, this project or this component of the Crystal Houses project was never intended to be an affordable component, whether that was part of the 2019 approval or since the ownership has changed. And so what has been happening over time is what went from with its original approval in 2019, only one building was going to be an affordable housing component. That was going to be the Crystal Houses 5. Where we are today, all of the buildings, but for the Crystal Houses 7 and 8, will have some level of committed affordability from, all the way up to the existing towers buildings that are at the 80% to or a little bit higher AMI range. So for these two buildings, the 7 and 8, again, never had the expectation that they would have a housing component. However, with the increase in the additional density, the project as a whole will now be committing more of the units to an affordable housing component. So again, they're only obligated to provide a certain amount of units. I forget what that number is with the last amendment. We'll be increasing that with this component as well. So again, not really trying to address affordability for these unit types, but the project as a whole continues to commit a significant tranche of their portfolio to affordable housing. And I think that, as we've talked about with other projects in the vicinity, this project alone is doing so much to help achieve our Crystal City redevelopment goals of affordable housing. So it really is an exciting, achievement and just something that keeps getting increased over time. So hopefully that puts a little bit of perspective in, but again, we weren't expecting, nor have we asked this section of Crystal Houses to commit any of their units to an affordability component.
Yeah, we will have like over 600, I think, affordable units across the entirety of the site plan. And again, given the various sources of funding that the team and the county has been able to secure, some of those are affordable at like 30% AMI. I mean, we have some deeply affordable units, particularly in CH3. So a lot is coming to help, I guess is what I would say.
So Nick, it looks like your hand is down and your mic is muted. So assuming that answers the rest of your questions. Okay.
Thanks. I don't have
We'll
any
go.
others. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So next we'll go to Eric.
Hi, I might have missed it. Did you describe how you are handling PUDO? You know, pick up, drop off, especially FedEx, package delivery, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it, but Jack, if you want to speak to it, go right ahead.
So, Eric, it's a great question, and it's come up at a couple of community meetings. We have interior to the site. I want to say the number is 3, but maybe 4 dedicated drop-off parking spaces and pickup spaces. So there are some. We are looking for ways to grow that number. It's a tight site, as we talked about, trying to meet the housing goals, but we are sensitive to it and have found at least part of the answer in some dedicated spaces.
And our team from our civil engineering group can correct me, but I believe at least one of those spaces is oversized to accommodate a larger, UPS or FedEx type truck.
That's correct. There's a oversized lay-by space in front of each of the principal buildings.
Great.
In front of these buildings, can you show where that it is on the map, just to give me some sense? Because FedEx drivers are under time and they will park as close as they can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they also just often don't obey any rules. I see them everywhere all over the county, but that's almost a separate issue. The other thing, Eric, that we will also likely be looking at is the street parking directly in front of the buildings. We can request during permitting for that to be signed for like 15-minute or sort of short-term parking. That can help leave some spaces open that a FedEx driver, for example, might snag. But I'm with you. We've got the spaces. Jack's about to highlight them internally, and hopefully they'll use them, but they will park in the middle of the road sometimes.
Yeah,
Go
Billy,
ahead.
these are the 2 spaces. There's one in front of 7, and then there's this one over here in front of 8A or next to 8A.
Okay, and those are going to be listed as, temporary parking only or something like that, signed.
We'll have to work through that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good point. We'll have to work through that and think through it.
Yeah, that's an
appropriately.
internal drive area, so we have more rights with anything that we do there. It's a matter of just ensuring that we're sharing a space equitably with the other neighbors who have an interest in that site as well. But internal stuff we have more control over. On the street itself, that's where we could look for maybe short-term signage, but the county has to approve that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, so if it's just sitting there parking, somebody could sit there all day in one person, and that doesn't solve your pickup drop off. So
Understood. Yeah.
We'll absolutely have rules around the use of those. We haven't thought it completely through, but there will be rules so that nobody is parking their vintage car there for forever. So give us a chance to think that through. And again, as Nick said, talk with with Washington Housing and OP and make sure there's a fair way to allocate the time and space.
yeah, I like the location of those, just as long as it is like 15-minute parking only or something like that, so you don't have that the FedEx or mail deliveries or Amazon or whoever can actually use those. That's the only thing I would be concerned about at this point. Those look like nice locations. I like that. I think especially on the back end people, that's where they'll go. Now the front end people, who go out on the street, that's a different story. But yeah, the back end people, that looks nice for the behind the building people.
It's a good point, Eric, and we need to talk to Washington Housing and just see, clearly those large buildings are getting lots of, deliveries. And so my sense is that the drivers want to make as few stops as they can. So maybe, I'd like to think that they will use the internal streets while they're serving the larger multifamily buildings. And let's just get a sense of how they currently access those buildings and the sites and come up with a plan for the use of those dedicated spaces.
Yeah, because these are going to be relatively well-off people who are going to order a lot on Amazon and things like that. And so you want to make sure that you have a process so that things aren't, all over the place and causing problems for the pedestrians and other people.
It's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Eric. It looks like we've got Pam. If anyone else hasn't spoken yet, I know that there are only 5 minutes left in the scheduled meeting time, so we'll go back to Pam, but I just want to make sure that anyone who wants the opportunity to speak today or ask questions gets the chance to. But with that, Pam, do you have another question?
One quick question that I forgot to ask. I would like to see an illustration along Fern Street of the entrances to the building versus the sidewalk. And are there steps going down sometimes? Sometimes is it relatively flat? Is it variable along the block? And what I want to make sure is that we don't have a bunch of steps that would get into the sidewalk somehow, that if you need a bunch of steps that they are parallel to the building rather than perpendicular to the building.
But you're exactly right. That was the purpose of, see if I can get to this last slide down here. But whenever we have a certain number of steps, we always run them parallel for that exact reason. So
Okay,
this would,
good. That is accurate. That was my question. Thank you so much.
yeah, okay, great.
There have been site plans when they go right out into the sidewalk, and that's a very bad thing.
No, very bad.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I did just want to check again. Is there anyone who's joining us by phone that wishes to speak and can't raise their hand? Right now would be the time to unmute. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone unmuted. Well, if there are no more questions, I wanted to thank everyone for attending today. And again, we'll keep you updated with any further scheduled meetings with the Planning Commission or SPRC. We're hoping to schedule a meeting sometime for the end of September. So thank you all for attending today, and we will be in touch with more information.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.